My name is Andy McBurney. I will be your MC for this morning. I have worked in sustainability and culture change and environmental education since last century now. I'm an MC and I'm a speaker and facilitator. I've worked with all levels of government on sustainability and corporates and communities and schools. I helped set up the Bendigo Sustainability Group. I'm from Bendigo, Australia, about 3 hours north of here, and very excited to be here this morning. There's been a lot of talk about what's possible in Australia, and today's like a little walk into the future, because the people of Mariestad have already walked the talk. Is that how we say it? Yeah. We've done it. And Amory Lovins from the Rocky Mountains Institute in the US, he says, if it exists, it must be possible. And it exists in Mariestad, so it must be possible. So we're going to take a bit of a walk together into the future. I'd like to acknowledge this morning that we are standing and sitting on Gunditj Mara country. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. We have a lot to learn about setting up a local, peer-to-peer, sustainable economy from people who managed to do that for at least 60,000 years, and I believe in Warrnambool now possibly 120,000 years, which is pretty amazing. I wanted to start this morning with a quote from a book that was written in 1997. This journey towards sustainability has been going on for a long time. And Paul Hawken wrote a book in 1997 called Natural Capitalism. And in this book, he says, and I'd like you all to just close your eyes for one moment and go with me here. We're going to imagine from 1997. And he said, imagine for a moment a world where cities have become peaceful and serene because cars and buses are whisper quiet and vehicle exhaust is only water vapour. And he says, is that utopia? Well, all this and more is possible in years to come as a result of economic, technological and social trends that are already in place. And he was talking in 1997 about hydrogen and only water vapour coming out the back of the tailpipe. And that feels like a long time ago, but it also feels like yesterday as well. And Mariestad have been ahead of the curve on that journey. They have the whisper quiet cars and buses, and want even more, and would like to buy even more, I believe. So the Swedish regional city of Mariestad, they wanted to cut their carbon emissions. They wanted it to be powered by renewable energy available around the clock. The solution has seen the city turn itself into an electric village, a sustainability demonstration project, and designated by UNESCO as a biosphere. We're going to find out more today about how they achieved this. But we've got 100 people in the room here, and we're going to be talking about hydrogen. So I just want to find out from people in the room what your understanding of hydrogen is. So can I ask everyone to put their hand up if they've heard of hydrogen energy? You heard of hydrogen energy? Well, you booked a ticket to come. There was a couple of hands down there. This is going to be brand new for those people. Okay, have you studied hydrogen energy a bit? Have you been reading blogs, been reading articles on hydrogen energy? Hands up. Okay, so that's a bit over half the room. Did you all put your hand up there? Okay, are you totally excited and ready for Warrnambool to be a hydrogen energy economy? Hands up. More people than have been reading about hydrogen energy, which is pretty amazing. The faith and the trust there is brilliant. Hands up if you have a fuel cell and a hydrogen car at home. Only the front row. Okay, hands up if you're a Warrnambool City Councillor. Okay, keep your hands up if half the next annual budget is going to be devoted to the transition to hydrogen. The mayor kept his hand up. There's good, we got two. I know it's budget time right now. So Before we start, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you for a moment and just have a bit of a conversation about what brought you here today. Was it any of those reasons you've already heard about, or was it something else? Just turn to the person next to you. What brought you here? Why are you here? This morning's event, we are going to hear from the Mariestad and Nielsen Energy team about what they've been doing, and hopefully we're going to be very inspired by what is already in place over there. We're going to hear from DELP, State Government. We're going to hear from Hydrogen Mobility Australia, and we're going to have Q&A as well. So there'll be plenty of time for questions and there'll be plenty of time for conversation. And the team are all fired up about the Q&A and want to know about how you think it might work here and what questions you have from the technical to the social to the cultural to the practical. We're going to hear first though from our Mayor of the City of Warrnambool, Councillor Tony Herbert, who's going to welcome everyone to this event. And you've got to be pretty excited here in Warrnambool because the Warrnambool team, probably headed by Sean Miller, can you wave, Sean? Are ahead of the curve here. I'm from Bendigo, Australia, very jealous that this is happening in Warrnambool because this is going to come in a rush into Australia, and the cities and the regions that are at the forefront are going to reap the social and the economic and the environmental benefits of this transition that's coming. So as we invite Councillor Tony Herbert down to the stage to welcome you all here, can you all give both him and the City of Warrnambool a huge round of applause for making this possible?
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome everyone to this incredibly exciting morning. An incredibly warm welcome to our Swedish delegation. Councillor and Mayor Warren Abrahamsson, Mayor of Mariestad, welcome. Hans Olive Nielsen, Senior Technical Director of Nielsen Energy, welcome. Brigitte Nielsen, welcome. Martina Wetton, welcome. She's the partner of Nielsen Energy with market and PR responsibilities. Pontus Lundgren, there's Pontus at the back. He is the CEO of Nielsen Energy, welcome. Raven Merchandani, welcome. Is from Nielsen Energy Australia. And Jonas Johansson, how's my Swedish pronunciation? Development Director of Mariestad Municipality. He's the equivalent to Sean in Mariestad. Welcome to you too. Also, Claire Johnson, CEO of Hydrogen Mobility Australia. Welcome to you too, Claire. And Gabriel Henry, Director of Energy from DELP, from the State Government. Welcome. Would you all like to give those? Without going any further, I would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Noon Nation on which we stand, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow councillors, Councillor David Owen, Councillor Sue Cassidy, Councillor Kylie Gaston, Councillor Michael Now, I believe is here somewhere, Councillor Robert Anderson, and Councillor Peter Jean. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Peter Schneider, CEO of Warrnambool. Helping to make it possible today is Alistair McCosh, Director of Deakin Warrnambool, and Grant Sullivan, who are our hosts for this morning. And a special thank you to Regional Development Australia and their representatives here today who have also sponsored this delegation and made this visit possible. And to all of you here this morning who believe it's important for us to make these changes collectively for the benefit of our entire planet, welcome. The Warrnambool community has made it loud and clear that we wish to become carbon neutral by 2040. Council's sustainability plan, Green Warrnambool, reflects our community aspirations. And while we have committed to being a carbon neutral city by 2040, Mariestad has committed to become fossil fuel free society by 2030. In order to get there, we will require innovative solutions. Mariestad is an early adopter of alternative energy solutions. The city is using hydrogen to power vehicles, produce heat and provide electricity for buildings. We want to learn from them. Mariestad has been nominated by UNESCO to be a model area of sustainability. Warrnambool City Council will now be working with the municipality of Mariestad and Nelson Energy to share information on renewable energy and sustainability projects. Projects that will promote community, industry, education and technology exchange between our two cities. We are excited that Nelson Energy and the City of Mariestad are here to share their story with us in Warrnambool. When we share our ideas, work together and support each other to solve common challenges, amazing things can happen. They're already happening in Mariestad. I hope the takeaway for you today will not be stuck in a debate about if this technology works, but more about how can we make this technology work for Warrnambool to power a cleaner energy future for us all. So I thank you all for coming along today. Thank you to our Mariestad friends, and I look forward to hearing their thoughts and innovative ideas. Thank you.
Thank you to our Mayor Tony Herbert there. So we are going to hear from the Mariestad team now, which is pretty exciting. Martina Whitney is a partner in Nelson Energy. She's one of the initiators of this event and this trip taking place. She's going to provide context for the visit to Australia. So we'll introduce the Nelson Energy team and the Mariestad team. And she's going to tell us why Warrnambool is an exciting prospect for a hydrogen energy economy. Before the team come down the front, hands up if you're fluent in Swedish. We have have you met? No. We have one Swedish person over here, so there'll be lots of conversations happening over there. So the Mariestad Nelson team are also mostly fluent in English. Some less so, I believe. But we are all going to give them a huge Warrnambool welcome because what they have to say here is just totally amazing. The debate in Australia has been a little bit, can we say backwards? Yeah? You know, we've all been waiting for this transition to come, and hopefully because we've been held back, it's going to come in a rush, which will be very exciting. In Mariestad, they've been rolling up their sleeves and they've been getting going and building a new economy, which is pretty exciting. In Warrnambool, as we just heard, the 2040 community plan has the goal of the city having zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 and energy needs met by renewable energy. So there's lots of thinking to be done, lots of innovation to be done, lots of projects to be done, lots of ideas to work through. And you know, this is going to require a systems thinking approach. But the question for us all this morning is, are we ready to talk about this change now? Who's excited to be in the room and ready to talk about what's coming? Yes? Yes? Okay. Awesome. I'm going to hand over to Martina. And can you give her a huge round of applause?
the young people in the room. Thank you so much for taking time out of your calendars to be here today. My name is Martina. I represent Nelson Energy, together with my fellow colleagues, Hans Olof, who is the technical director, who will be really showing you on a more in-depth level how hydrogen can be stored, renewable energy can be stored until it's needed. Birgitta, who is his better half, and also a very strong player of our team. Pontus at the back, our CEO, who is keeping us all on track. Robin and Craig, who are assisting us, trying to understand this part of the world. We come from quite harsh conditions up in the north. Some of you may know, since you are of Swedish descent. We come also from a long background of engineers who's been forced to sort of really look into how can we address energy efficiency so we can survive. It's cold up there. In our country, it's more or less dark for 5 out of 12 months. We have sub-zero situations as well. Having said that, we are able to use the sun in Sweden and be fully self-sufficient on electricity, on heat, and also on transport. We'll be able to hopefully share that with you today. There is not that many of us, but we decided to really go into action instead of just talking about it, and I think that's one of the reasons you were initiated by saying that. We're a very small organisation, but we did decide to go out there and do it. Thankfully enough, the Mayor of Mariestad, Johan, and his colleague responsible for the business side, business director of Mariestad, decided to put the trust into us. So now it's being commissioned. Am I still? Yeah, I'm still on. We've been commissioned. And I think it really is important that Johan and Jonas are able to share their story. And again, it is not New York and Bombay. It's Warrnambool and it's Mariestad. And for me, one of the reasons why I think it's so important, and the driving force for me to be here, is that we can connect the world by being global leaders, even though we are small. And I think the Councillor Owen showed that very well in his, this lovely clip where you said, this part of the world has said no to drilling for oil and fossil fuels in your vicinity. And actually is showing global leadership. So even though you are small, you can be persistent. And maybe that's what really is setting us apart. We haven't got time to talk about it, we just do it instead. So I'll leave you on that note, and please do ask all your questions later on in the Q&A. Really looking forward to it. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. Now up on stage, the main man, the Mayor of Mariestad, Johan Abrahamsson.
Hello, my name is Johan Abrahamsson and I'm very glad to be here in Australia. My language is not so quite good in English, but I shall try it. It's first time for me to do this in English. This is it. And I very thank you for that you invite us to come down and explain what we have done in Mariestad. And I don't understand why always we see the problem when we can see how we can do it. So now I take it about myself. I'm 48 years old, and when I'm not political, I have a company, 4 generations. I have a restaurant, a camping, and summer house, and I carpenter in school. Reason I do this is because I will be starting this side. I have been political for 14 years now in Mariestad, and I've been chairman 2012 in Mariestad. And I think you must do it and not talk more, because everybody make new documents, they will find and do new documents, and they do more fines, and they do more documents. And I said, no, we must do it on real. We cannot do so much documents as we have done in Sweden. And they're the reason I start politics. Because me and my father sit at home and was very angry at because it takes time. We shall build some new house, and it takes time. And my mother said, you cannot sit and screaming at the table in kitchen. You must do something. Some of you must be political. And my father said, yes, you do it. So they're the reason I start this trip to do politics. And when I start 2012, we have about 20 years in Mariestad go down all the time. Electrolux, one big factory, and do refrigerator, have closed. 1,500 people quit. Paper factory was 1,100 people, and now about 500 people. And we must do something, because in Mariestad they're talking all the time, we are dying, we must do something. So they're the reason we start Electric Village. Because this Electric Village is, we will have new blood in Mariestad, we will have new energy, we must do something. And we think if we do the new technology, we can get new kind of work. And we have worked very, very much to think outside the box. All the time. I said, every people who work in Mariestad, we said, don't think what you think last day, you must think new. All the time. Because if you shall do something, you must think outside the box. It's never happening if you're not thinking new. So we have built new houses, lot of new houses in Mariestad. Because if we get new people moved to Mariestad, we have new blood all the time. And we have 3 levels in Sweden. We have national level, we have regional level, and all these 2 levels makes a lot of papers. And we have 290 communities, and Mariestad is 190. It is in the middle of Sweden. They are the reason Electric Village, because the most look like Mariestad's size, and about 100 is bigger. So there we have village, and the other one have city. And we have also Skaraborgs Kommunalförbund. There we work a lot of together, 15 communities. And we work with transport and this. And this meeting was fantastic, because the government have taken one paper at 2030 we shall have no diesel or benzene. And Skaraborgs Kommunalförbund said, no, we shall be best in Sweden, we shall be finished 2025. And I said, hello, if we shall do it in 2025, the bus we buy now, we shall start it for 5 years, because it takes time to do this. So that was very much disgusting. So I take these papers and go home to people who work in Mariestad and said, we must do it in our way. We start Electric Village. And we have started many things. So Jonas can show us. But in Mariestad, we're not talking, we do things. And they are the reason we are leading in many places. So we have one thing. If you walk and following other footsteps, you always need to do first. So I'll leave it to Jonas, and he show what we do.
day, everyone. My name is Jonas Johansson. I work as a business development director at the municipality of Mariestad. And my background is that I've been working in the private sector all my life in several companies. And until a year ago, I started in the municipality in Mariestad. I found this work really interesting and exciting. And together with my team, we work day to day, work with the Electric Village development, and I will give you a brief and big picture of that concept. But first, I would like to thank you, and we're really honored to be invited by Warrnambool, Australia, to come here and share our Mariestad story and talk about what we are doing the other side of the globe. I think that's fantastic. We are connected and we can share a lot of experiences together. And I think we have a lot in common. And we are really keen on to listen to your visions and your ambitions for the future and learn from it. And we start to talk about the Mariestad story. So we start with the frame. If we look at this picture, is a view from Mariestad at Lake Vänern. That's the biggest lake in Sweden. And you got clean water. It's a sunny day. And this is water and sun. It's essential for us. And we have also been designated by the United Nations, the UNESCO, to be a model area for the sustainable work and create a sustainable society. We're very proud of that. And we also add those ambitions that our mayor just presented. And if we put some ambitions, we have to do things. We want to do real actions to live up to the climate goals, the Agenda 2030. We have signed the Paris Agreement. You can't just stop signing, you have to do something. And why we are doing this is what our mayor recently presented, is that we get lots of works, jobs, and that's why it's important for us to find and create new jobs. Because when the society is changing, which is going right now, there are always business opportunities. So we want to find the new business opportunities and bring it to our local companies, and that will bring new jobs and create new professions for the future. And when we are doing all this, we get attraction from other cities in Sweden, and we see now that we are getting new type of tourism as well. So if we put this all together in a concept, is this the central, the heart of the Electric Village concept, is that we're finding new business opportunities and creating new jobs within the sustainable work. This is very important for us. To do that, we have to be close to science. We will collaborate with several of Sweden's universities. And when scientists want to test an idea, we are the place for that, to be a test demonstration area. And one example is that to test road-bound charging, to test if it's possible to charge when you're driving. That's the scientists thinking about beyond the charging posts. When we got a lot of electric vehicles, is that capacity enough? They don't think so. We need other solutions. And we are the test and demonstration area for that. We also work with sustainable society to create different kinds of solutions. In transport, for example, this logistic hub, it's a way to stop heavy-duty vehicles go inside the center of the city. We reload outside the town and then go by our electric vehicles into the center to distribute the goods to our schools and such locations. And we do that, we will give less emissions, less noise, and we do that with personnel that stands a bit far away from ordinary work, and that will get us meaningful work for them, and it's a social responsibility we have. So we combination of all these in that logistic hub. We also have to look into the innovative procurement when we're getting new techniques. We have to test new business models. And we have done that in a way of buying solar cells and put them on the municipalities' roofs without having any economical investment. Is that possible? Yeah. We have done it recently. We work with renewable energy, and the best example of this is this plant of H2E. It stands for hydrogen to energy. It's the name of our energy system, and it's actually the first solar-powered hydrogen refueling station in the world, which is off-grid and public. That's the unique. It's all started a couple of years ago when our major got the opportunity to buy a refueling station from another country in Nordic countries. And you have to decide very quickly. It was an opportunity which occurred. It just took 2 weeks in arrangement agreement, and suddenly we have a refueling station. But there were no fuel cell cars in Sweden. How come do we invest in a refueling station? Yeah, the automotive industry look at Sweden and they see no refueling stations. It's not going to be a selling market there, and the opposite way around. It's some part have to break that situation. And Mariestad is one of these locations which started to invest in a refueling station. As you see in the map, there is a central location for Sweden to create a hydrogen corridor, and that's important to create a new development of the hydrogen station in Sweden. A year ago, we started to thinking to come to the next level, to produce our own hydrogen at the same place from the sun. And that's possible with Nelson Energy techniques. And Hans-Ol will talk more about the techniques later on. And I will continue to talk about how we involve inhabitants and our companies in this concept. Because we are a really small town, just 24,000 inhabitants, how can we involve all people? We start with the children. The children is the next generation. They think they are our customers. And we support them with educational materials and give them knowledge how to act to get better sustainable work. And I think this is a really good thing to do. And I'm very glad to present that yesterday, before I go to the airport and go here, we collected a new produced movie from our children in the school.
Airways in Australia.
I'm proud of it because it comes from our own children in school. We also work with our local companies. They are involved in our projects. It's very important that our companies getting to know cutting-edge knowledge about next coming business, because that is creating new jobs. We also put together all information about our projects in a brochure and send it out to all households in Mariestad. We also put together information in email letters to our companies, working with the social media, websites and so on. We have now bought 8 fuel cell cars in the municipality, and we think that the best people to use them is our home care person, because they're driving in 2 shifts. They use the car a lot, and they need a lot of hydrogen for it. So that's also a way to get new ambassadors for creating the concept of electric village, to involve to day-to-day work. And the home care person is one of them. If we took together the investments, the carpool, we have more than 100 cars in our carpool, and we think if we are every year changing the cars, a few of them, and if we can change the fuel cell car, we have calculated that when we are coming up to 40-50 cars, we are starting to save money instead of using fossil fuels. And this is really interesting. We are doing real actions for the climate change and also get economical benefits of it. That's very strong. We use the local companies in the construction, I said. We also work with the universities. We are connected to Gothenburg University, for example. The tourists, I told before, a new type of tourist is also getting a new blood in our local businesses. The housing program, we have a new area for families to build new houses, and we see that our new companies coming with the new techniques and solar panels integrated in the roof. They wanted to be a part of our atmosphere for sustainability. So it's attraction from outside the municipality as well. We're working with a new project. It's about a preschool. It's going to be an off-grid house, like Hans Olof will tell more about. It's about solar panels and hydrogen storage. And we have that for a preschool. And that is an interesting project. And we always have the connection and talk with our local companies to get this new business going. The future project, We have a train going through in Mariestad, which is driven by fossil fuel, diesel actually. It's not good. We want to produce more hydrogen and buy a fuel cell driven train. But we have to collaborate with more cities in our region to get that happen. And that's ongoing discussions right now. And we also think that the agriculture is a next coming project. In our area we have a lot of agriculture. And I think next coming project could be to produce food from sustainable resources. Renewable sources to like water, sun, hydrogen to produce food. That would be really interesting. Finally, my presentation will have some of our experiences. You have to have visions for the future. You have also listened to the science, what's possible and what's coming up. And you also have a holistic approach and a system thinking to get all this together, because it's not only one technique is the solution. There are several techniques which is the system. That's the solution. And you can have all this thinking, but you have also add something. You have to have the courage and the leadership to take hard decisions, which is not short-term benefits. You have to have long-term thinking. And that's sometimes hard to take these decisions. And in our municipality, we have that leadership. And you have also need to have the determination to get things done in the organization, to do things. And I think that we have so much in common, Warrnambool and Mariestad, and we can learn from each other, and we can collaborate in future of this, and I'm sure that we can do great things. And I think together we are the solution. And let us get things happen, and let us get things done. Thank you very much for your time.
Another round of applause for Johan and Jonas. Now, we're now going to hear from Hans Nielsen. And he's the founding father of Nielsen Energy. He's a true pioneer with passion for tailor-made renewable energy solutions. He founded the company in 2017 and has been leading emissions-free, off-grid renewable energy solutions, including long-term storage of renewable energy in hydrogen. He's had a career in the military, at Siemens in Germany. He founded his first company in 1975. He met Birgitta in 1970, and they've been a pretty strong partnership ever since. In 2005, they started investing in wind energy. He does a lot of public speaking. He'll speak about RE 8760, which is renewable energy for the 8,760 hours we have in a calendar year. He'll talk about why it's as simple as that. He'll talk about why it's important to walk before you talk. He'll talk about he and Birgitta's off-grid house, including something that I'm pretty sure no one in Australia has had before, which is under driveway heating to keep the snow off. You can do this with hydrogen. And he'll also encourage the Q&A at the end. Could you make Hans Nielsen very welcome? I'm not sure how we work this. problems in Sweden as well. Big round of applause for
Okay, thank you for being invited to Warrnambool here, and I will continue with what Jonas mentioned a bit about, and that is the Nelson Energy company, what we are doing, and how that company was founded, the reason for it. And it all, I think you will get the story when I show you the pictures here. And you see here, the next slide, yeah, renewable energy systems. Of course, that's what I've been talking about. And the renewable energy systems, that is the sources maybe, that is, we have two really powerful sources, and that is the sun and the wind. And you all know, or now you know, that the sun is the base for all energy on our planet. So that is what we really should use in a better way than we do today. And that is what we have done, and what I started to do myself, of a huge interest in renewable energy systems. And I will see here now. Yeah, right, there's a picture, how it all, and it's a simple picture, but it is as simple as you see on the screen here. It all starts with, you see, solar panels or PV panels, or wind power, depending on what's accessible. We have so far just been using PV panels because that is easier to install on buildings, and also they are, let me say, compared with wind turbines, they don't, they are more or less invisible. You don't see them when they are on the roof or on the ground, no one sees them. And that is an advantage with the PV panels, and when once it's installed properly, they will last forever. Again, to store this energy, not the problem, but the thing that has to be solved is how to store this energy, because wind and sun, we cannot switch it on and off. It just happens when it will themselves. They are uncontrollable. But if you do use some available technique, you can harvest the energy, you can store it, and then use it whenever needed. And that is what this picture here describes. As you can see here, there is I have to look like this. Here it all starts here. This is a device called an electrolyzer, and that is the device that is splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Excuse me, can you please pick up the microphone?
Okay.
Thank you.
Like that. All right. Like this? All right. So, yeah, I have to see here. Yeah, so it all starts with this electrolyzer here, that gets power from the solar or wind, and in the container actually, where you have water, when electricity is connected to it, the water is split up into oxygen and hydrogen, and in this case, hydrogen is the gas that is carrying all the energy, and that is stored into a container or a tank. Very easy, and the oxygen is just released to the atmosphere. And here the hydrogen can be stored here for any time. There is no best before date. It can be there forever, but that's not the purpose. It's there to be used for some reason, and the main reason so far depends on if it's for buildings. It's used by a fuel cell to produce electricity and heat, or it can be used to refueling electric vehicles like they do in Mariestad. So It can supply energy for buildings or mobility. And yeah, you see here is just energy consumers can be anything. It can be factories, schools, shopping centers, or charging electrical vehicles, battery electrical vehicles. So I will, how this process works, I will show this little film here, so you get a better understanding of that. And we will continue after that. Okay, let's continue here. Let's see what next. Yeah, again here, that is the solution. We call our energy system RE8760, and it was explained before here. RE is for renewable energy, and 8760 is for all hours in the year. So this system can deliver renewable energy on any place on our planet every single hour in the year. Sometimes I do here, every fourth year we have 29 days in February. Yeah, and I do, yes, that's correct, that's the year we are doing service on the system. Every fourth year we maintain it. So there's a solution for that as well. And the way we do it is that when we know, I mean, to design a system like this, we know we must have knowledge about the energy consumption of whatever it is. And if we have that energy consumption, we can start to design the system, and out comes all the components that is needed, the size of PV panels, the storage tank, the fuel cell, etc. And when that is done, it can be built into the building itself, or in containers, as you see on the picture there, and it's module based, so it's easy to move around or expand. If it's built into a building, it's more or less permanent there. It's a bit more difficult to make a difference. But in module concept, it's so easy to remove it or expand it. And that's what we have done. You will see some pictures there from Mariestad, where the fueling production site is based in containers. And then, of course, very important is also to maintain and keep the system running. And of course, we need to keep an eye on it more than every fourth year, but it's remotely controlled. So if there are any functions that is out of order, of course we are notified. And the thing is that we normally, it's not so that we, Nilsson Energy, is traveling around all of Sweden, because we are training the customers' personnel to maintain the unit. That's the way we want to do it, of course. Yeah, so that is the RE8760 solution. 8760, yeah, right. And here is a picture where it all started. I mean, that's the reason, that house is the reason why we are here today, and you are all here in this room. That was never on the to-do list when the house was built. I mean, we got an opportunity to build a new house in 2012, and then I was quite triggered by all talking that I've heard about how houses could be built and how things could be done to be more efficient and more friendly to the environment. But again, a lot of PowerPoints and pictures and brochures, nothing to see in real. So when this opportunity came, we said, no, we want to build that house everyone is talking about. It should be self-sufficient, it should be components from established suppliers, so it should be proven components. And that was challenge by itself, because in Sweden there was only one of the 7 or 8 components available, so all the other components has to be bought from abroad in Europe. But anyway, the components were found, and then the other challenge was then to get them working together, and that was the interesting thing, to get a system that operates by itself. It should be like living in a normal house, no special rules to follow. It should just be as good as or even better than a normal built house. And what you can see here is really, if I don't show you here, the roof here is all covered by PV panels, and in the center here, solar panels heating water. So it's building integrated PV panels and solar panels, 2 functions, panels and also a coverage for the roof. And here, that's not a window, that's also PV panels in the south facade, because that is the best position up in the northern part of Europe to have a panel faced or direction to capture most of the sun. And that one is really active during winter when we have snow and frost on the roof. And here it's not so visible, but here is 2 big PV panels as well on the west facade. So when the sunset is on the afternoon, during sunset, these panels capture sun energy as well. And of course, a lot of, even though we are not here, I mean, you have much more sun here in Australia than us, but we still have too much during summer. The house doesn't need a lot for heating, and so it's more or less for warm water. So all the excess energy then is stored in the way the little movie showed you before. And the thing was, we moved in the November 14, and then next year in March 15, when the sun started to be more powerful, the house was disconnected from the grid in March 15, and ever since then the house has been self-sufficient on sun energy for keeping the house running, and we are also driving electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles so far, and we can also charge these 2 cars. And it was in March 2015 when it was disconnected. A journalist heard about that, and she asked me, can I visit you and write a short article about what you're doing? And yeah, I said, yes, you're welcome, and she did. And after that, when she presented that article in a magazine in Sweden, it all started. People get very, very interested in this, because we could show them that we can live on sun power around the year, and we have 4 to 5 months with too little sun or even no sun, but that is sorted by storing the hydrogen. Yeah, it created a lot of interest. People asked to come, and I have counted all the people that came, and they have all been self-invited. I have not invited a single person any time, and during 4 years now, 4 years here in March this year, there was 3,853 visitors, self-invited. And it continues, yeah, it keeps on. This month before we left for Australia, there have been 67. So that just keeps on all the time. And of course, the people here from Mariestad and other cities have been there visiting to see that it really works, and have then asked us, can you do the same for us? And of course, we can. Because at the same time, I will tell you that in the house, you can't see it here, but there are about 97 devices measuring energy movements in the house. It sounds a bit stupid, but that was interest. And that information is very good now when we are designing other energy systems for customers. And that was another picture from the north side of the house. You will see some pictures of the equipment as well. The house is the size of the house is 504 square meters inside. So it got a bit big, but that was the roof. I had to blame for that. I needed a certain size to get all the panels on it, and then it became a bit big underneath the roof. Yeah, here is, I have to stand here to see the pictures. Yeah, there are some, that is actually in the house. All these, this equipment here is the energy supplier of the house. So this creates all the standard 50 Hz, 400 volt system. Here's a picture of the fuel cell. That's me. And here is the device. I mean, when you have hydrogen in your house, you must, some of you probably think that hydrogen is a dangerous gas. Yes, it is, if you don't handle it in the right way. Same as butane or fumes from petrol, that's also dangerous. But before a system like this is installed in a building or in a house, you have to do a risk assessment together with the fire department in the city. And when they are happy, I'm happy, and then there is no problems with this. So hydrogen in a living area is not an issue if you treat it in the right way. This is just a picture of what such a device could look like. They are placed in different locations in the room. And here also this is our Minister of Energy came on visit to see what we were doing, and he was very convinced that this type of energy systems will be the future, microgrids. Okay, we have to keep. Here is. Oh, yeah, here is a picture from Mariestad, from the on-site hydrogen production installation, and here is PV panels on the ground. It's 250 kilowatt installed capacity, but multiply that with 7 and you have the square meters, that 250 times 7. And this is a picture also inside the electrical container. Here's some inverters that takes care of the solar energy. Here are battery boxes. Here's a compressor that compresses the gas, because that needs to be done if you want to keep the cylinders limited in size. You need to compress the gas. And here, let's see here, if we have more pictures here. Yes, here is what it looks like in Mariestad. It's all container based. It's 5 containers in a row, and this is the one where all the hydrogen is produced. Storage container, storage container, and then you don't see it behind the door, the container with the electrical equipment. And again, it's placed there, almost already built on a different location, and then it's more like a plug-and-play installation. So that will be all officially opened in May 28th, here this month or next month. So this is what it could look like, and here are some more pictures of this filling station here. There's the dispenser that you connect to your vehicle. And here's just some safety devices again in the system that checks pressure. Let's see here. Yeah, another thing, outside Mariestad, about 100 kilometers south Mariestad, there's another small city
called Warrnambool, and that's another project we have that is, as you can see, 6 apartment buildings, 172 flats or apartments, fully off-grid as well. That was old houses that were reconditioned because they were built in the 70s. They were needed there were 2 options: to just demolish them or restore them. And the municipality said we have to restore them and we'll make them modern. So they did this, and they also at the same time said we want to make them off-grid with the system we have. So we got that question, we did a calculation, and they are now 1 house is built. This was the first one. The second is undergoing renovation. So during next year, all 6 houses will be completed, and there is a central hydrogen production unit that then are supplying all the 6 houses with hydrogen. And you can see here, it's very tiny tube, such a tiny tube like this here, goes from the common hydrogen production unit. Here you can see it's just a pipe 8 millimeters thick, goes in the ground from the central production site to each of the houses. So that's when we know, it's usually a fairly fresh picture where we are putting the tubes in the ground. Yeah. And again, back here the time was tight one. Yeah. So again, with what we can do in Sweden, with much less sun than you have done here, you have any possibility to go this way. And again, the technique is proven, and the thing is just to calculate the energy need and then design the system. And you know, and the good thing is that the source is, or the fuel as I call it, is sun or wind, and the battery or the storage is just water that is used when you're storing energy. And then when energy is taken out of the water is returned back. No, you don't pollute anything, and you don't, consume any resources at all. So, I think that's it so far. Yeah, okay.
We give another huge round of applause to hands up if you also are visiting Hans-Olaf and Birgitte's house in the next 6 months or a year to have a chat. Yeah, we have at least a couple of people who will be coming to visit. I imagine the kettle takes up most of the energy in the house with that many visitors. So I imagine you all have lots of questions. We've heard from the Mariestad team now, but before Q&A, we're going to touch base quickly, if we can, with 3 people in Australia who can help us make this happen locally. So we have Ravan Merchandani is from Nielsen Energy in Australia, and he has actually been there and has come back and is very excited about it. Then we're going to hear from Gabrielle Henry from DELP, the Department of Environment, Water, Land and Planning in the Victorian Government. The Mariestad team and the Warrnambool team are heading to DELP later in the week, I think, for a meeting to talk about this and all the state government support that's no doubt going to flow towards Warrnambool. And sorry to jump the gun there on your announcement, Claire. Sorry, Gabrielle. And then Claire, who is from Hydrogen Mobility Australia. So we have some people here in the country who can make this happen for us in Warrnambool. But first, can we make Ravan Merchandani from Nielsen Energy in Australia very welcome.
Thanks very much, Ian. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much to the Council of Warrnambool for welcoming us here and hosting us here. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. My name is Ravan. 2 quick words of me before I tell you about the journey we've been through. Like a large part of Australia, I'm an immigrant. I came here in 1993 worked in Queensland for a long time with a hydrogen company, a French hydrogen company, worked with them in Australia, France and India. Then came back and joined Origin Energy and worked with the big coal people running the gas business for South Australia and Northern Territory. Energy does to the environment and the need for renewable energy across the world, not just in Australia. Then had the opportunity to move to LNG, which I thought was renewable or sustainable energy, before moving on to hydrogen now. I work with my business partner Craig, who's sitting in the front here, and we run together a 81-year-old Australian icon called Mac Valves. And Mac manufactures hydrogen valves, which we were developing for Europe because in Europe, across Germany, France, Holland, they have a plan to put in 250 hydrogen filling stations across the highways, the autoroutes, over the next 4 years. So as part of the endeavour to put Australian product into this initiative globally, Craig and me went to Sweden to try and sell Nielsen Energy some hydrogen valves. And Nielsen was very welcoming this year. Why don't you come all the way, come and sell us some valves. But we left converted to the Church of Hydrogen, I always say. Martina picked us up from the station and we drove to Hans Olof's house, the house that he just showed here. And I was blown away by what I saw, a house that was off-grid and had been sustainably off-grid in a country that has 220 days of rain a year and 4 months of no sun. So the idea that Hans Olof had actually delivered was to take what the world has been grappling with when it comes to renewable energy, which is what do you do with the energy when you can't make that energy? How do you get there? How do you make it sustainable when the sun is not available or when the wind is not available? And the world has been struggling with that. In fact, in Europe they have the opposite problem. If you fly from Amsterdam to London, for example, you go over the North Sea, and there's thousands of wind farm devices that are switched off. You can see them from the plane. And they're switched off because there's so much wind, but they're not able to store the energy. So they have the opposite problem. What do you do when you don't have enough energy storage capability, not what you do when you aren't able to make the storage. And what Hans Olof and Nielsen have proved is that hydrogen is that energy storage device. Hydrogen, unlike batteries, does not lose the charge over time. Hydrogen, just like water, can be piped in a pipeline. And hydrogen is as dangerous and not as dangerous as petrol or diesel if you know how to use it right. So if you think when the internal combustion engine came about in the early parts of the last century, there would have been the same discussions about driving on a bomb. And until the cars became safe, that was an issue. I've personally visited the BMW hydrogen vehicle program, and I saw the video of the crash test they did on the hydrogen vehicle. So they took their BMW and they crash tested it in an environment where the car would blow up. And the only thing that survived was a hydrogen tank, because they built it to be so safe. But hydrogen also has other properties in that when it in fact, when you get a hydrogen leak or when you get a hydrogen fire, you do not have an explosion. You have an escape of very high temperature hydrogen that goes off really quickly in one location. So there are ways to manipulate this gas to be much safer. What we saw in Hans Olof's house, we were one of the 2 from the 3,760 who were uninvited or invited themselves. His house is, in fact, I think in the Guinness Book for being the most visited house in the world. He's had Indian ministers, American secretaries, people from Australia trying to sell valves, all sorts of things. Then Hans Olof and Martina took us to this town on the way to Mariestad, where we saw a microgrid, an off-grid housing community coming into play using the same technology. The sun makes hydrogen. Hydrogen is used in a fuel cell to charge batteries. So just to stress on that point, I'm sure Claire will cover it a little bit more. A hydrogen vehicle is in fact an electric vehicle. So when you have a hydrogen home or a hydrogen school or a hydrogen vehicle, it's an electric vehicle, except instead of charging it from the wall, you're charging it with a hydrogen molecule. So there's no difference in the technology. From this housing community, then we went to Mariestad, and we were completely blown away in Mariestad. The hospitality was amazing. There was an Australian flag flying proudly on the city council building to welcome us to salesmen coming to sell the valve. But to sit there to meet the mayor, Mayor Johansson, who has touched us deeply from his vision, to have taken this town in such a small amount of time from thinking to doing, to proving, and to being a world leader was mind-blowing. To have the courage to take a solar park and say, right, let's put a hydrogen electrolyzer. Let's go further with that. Anybody in the town who buys a hydrogen car, come and fill it for free because the sun's making the hydrogen, which then spurs the community to start buying hydrogen vehicles. So in such a short span of time, they already have 8 vehicles. To commit the taxi service to moving to hydrogen as and when the permits get renewed, to commit the bus service to moving to hydrogen, to commit the train service to move to hydrogen. Again, to stress, 220 days of rain a year, they make so much hydrogen that they're going to pipe the hydrogen to their schools and to their city council buildings. Look at us over here, we thought, in Australia. We have so much sun, we have so much wind. We are the lucky country, but what is luck? What is luck if we are using resources that run out? Lucky people are people that have 2 qualities. The first is to spot an opportunity, but half the world has the ability to do that. The second quality lucky people have is the courage to take that opportunity once you spot it. And when we call ourselves a lucky country, we do need to go to that second step now, to have the courage to go ahead when we spot that opportunity. Hydrogen is sustainable because it doesn't use any resources from the planet. It gives you water and oxygen, the 2 things that we're taking away from the planet. You have so much sun here, you have so much wind, and you have a city council that is driven by the vision to do something no Australian city has done. So when we looked at all of that, we were very excited to be able to come here and to talk to you about it. But I want to leave you with just one more thought, which everyone has said in their presentations. But the reality is, by being the leader in moving to this new world, this new sustainable energy world, you also create jobs. You create the ecosystem for people to come here because you're the first to do it. You create the ecosystem for the hydrogen companies to come, for the electrolyzer company to come, for the fuel cell company to come, because you can mandate it. You can say, if I'm going to do this, I need you to be here. I need you to help my employment. The second is the fact that the skill base in Australia already exists. If you see what Hans Olof put up, it was pipes, plumbing, valving, and electricity, sparkies and plumbers. That's the skill base we need to be able to put in this technology in Warrnambool. It's not complicated, it's not rocket science, it's just having the courage to do it. We're here to help, we're here to answer all your questions, and I do hope you'll take the opportunity to be able to understand as much of this as possible to help you make your own decision. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raven. We are now going to hear from Gabrielle Henry, who is the Director of Business and Energy Sector Development for the Department of Environment, Water, Land and Planning in the Victorian Government. Can you please welcome Gabrielle to Warrnambool?
Just going to try to navigate. Oh, thank you, very kind. Just to introduce myself, as very kindly introduced, I'm Director of Business and Energy Sector Development at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning in Victoria. And my mandate covers a range of areas, sort of from business and industry engagement, sustainable transport, emerging technologies including hydrogen, and also the residential efficiency scorecard, sort of at the moment. So it's a whole range of things, but one of the most exciting is hydrogen. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about sort of what the Victorian Government are doing, sort of, and particularly the Victorian Hydrogen Investment Program. Here we are. Oh, that's really interesting. It's turned it into... That's right. That's fine. I'll just talk to it. Luckily, I've printed out a copy of the slides, so it's fine. It's really interesting. Great, thank you. So as I mentioned, I'll just talk a little bit about our policy landscape and specifically what Victoria's hydrogen opportunity is, the Victorian Hydrogen Investment Program, sort of finally a little bit about where we're at and where we're going to. So hydrogen's a growing opportunity within Australia, and there's been a lot of reports have been released recently and a lot happening nationally. I think Claire's going to talk to us a little bit in terms of the sort of the overall landscape there. Victoria is well placed to take a leadership position nationally, and my team is involved in the National Hydrogen Task Force, which is developing a national hydrogen strategy, and there's 6 different work streams sort of across that strategy, and I've got representatives in all the work streams. I'm personally involved in the industrial users work stream, so we're sort of learning a lot about and helping to influence what's happening with industries and a potential transition to hydrogen in Australia. So the Victorian Government is working, we've got a range of strategic policy frameworks to help our state reach net zero emissions, whilst also supporting jobs and economic growth. One of the particular strategies is the New Energy Technology Sector Strategy. The pillars of that are investing in clean energy generation technologies, encouraging new consumer markets, building statewide capabilities and strengthening sector skills, collaboration and innovation. So I'd like to talk particularly about why Victoria is really well placed sort of for hydrogen opportunities. So we've got abundant renewable energy sources such as solar and wind to meet the growing demand for low emissions energy supply. We've also got, most interestingly, an extensive natural gas pipeline infrastructure to potentially distribute hydrogen around the state. Now, this network is far more advanced than and far more extensive than other states around Australia. That provides opportunities as well as challenges. It's a little bit older than some of the other networks. But also industries are very reliant on it, and that provides a lot of opportunities for substituting natural gas with hydrogen. We've got industry which is already embracing this opportunity, and there's a number of trials, demonstration projects and business cases to understand hydrogen potential. My particular area is obviously fostering green hydrogen and the renewable potential sort of behind that, and sort of carbon neutral potential, but the Victorian Government is also involved in a trial in the Latrobe Valley in the sort of eastern part of the state, the hydrogen energy supply chain, and that's a $500 million project in partnership with Japan, and that's basically running off brown coal and producing hydrogen that will then be shipped sort of down to Hastings and then exported to Japan. So that for us is sort of a forerunner to a green hydrogen economy. We need to establish different ways of producing hydrogen and establish supply chains and build our capabilities within the state. So I just want to talk about some other of Victoria's advantages. So we've also got sort of the most dense transportation network sort of within Australia, and that's because of the denseness of our population compared to other states in Australia. We've got, readily available truck and rail hubs for the introduction of hydrogen refuelling stations. We're really well placed for export. We've got great ports, sort of for, particularly for Japan and South Korea, that have expressed interest sort of in the purchase of hydrogen. And we're able to leverage a well-established fossil fuel industry and the capabilities and skills that brings sort of with a really strong sort of skill base to build on. Within our energy system, we've got, as I've mentioned, really terrific electricity, renewable energy opportunities, and we've also got some sort of electricity and reliability and storage opportunities within the state. We've got, for industrial users, we've got a really strong manufacturing base in Victoria, and as I mentioned, many of them are reliant on the already reticulated gas network and natural gas and the potential for substitution there. So I want to talk specifically about the Victorian Hydrogen Investment Program. That's a $2 million program that was launched in December last year by sort of our Minister, Lily D'Ambrosio. So we're setting out a really clear pathway for developing the Victorian hydrogen sector. Now, our first step was sort of market testing. So we sent out a request for industry submissions, which was held between December and February 2019. And I'll talk in a minute about the response to that. We've next got a stakeholder consultation phase through the Hydrogen Industry Development Discussion Paper, and that's the next step that's sort of soon to be released. The responses to that discussion paper will be used to inform Victorian Hydrogen Industry Development Plan, and that plan will sort of lead to a funding round, sort of most excitement to sort of potential participants in the hydrogen economy, sort of which will potentially fund research, trials, pilots and demonstrations to create a strong base of industry knowledge, skills and seed funding. So in terms of the response, what we're hearing about what's happening in the state, so we received 34 submissions to our request for industry submissions, and we met with sort of close to 100 different stakeholders sort of during the consultation phase. So that's shown a really strong area of interest in Victoria and the development. And we received project across production, distribution and end use, including hydrogen vehicles. And we received it from a number of different types of organisations. So there were industry bodies, and about 67% of stakeholders were commercial businesses. But we also had representation from universities, local councils, sort of, and other organisations. And just in terms of next steps, I'll just sort of wrap up. I realise we sort of pushed it a little bit for time. So next steps, as I mentioned, we've got a discussion paper which will be sort of released, sort of watch this space, sort of coming soon. We'll be going on a roadshow, sort of going around talking to people in the different areas and different regions, and then we'll be developing our industry development plan and guidelines, and then finally we'll have a round of grant funding sort of later on in 2019. So thanks very much sort of the opportunity to speak today. I'm very excited about this sort of potential opportunity for Warrnambool. I will disclose a little bit of personal interest. I live on the weekends in Camperdown, which is just up the road. So I'm very excited, although my remit covers the whole of the state, to see something happening a little bit in my backyard. So thank you.
Thanks, Gabrielle. And we're now going to hear from Claire Johnson, who's the CEO of Hydrogen Mobility Australia, and Claire stands between us and Q&A. And I hope you've all got some questions ready, because we're going to have a good little session there for questions and answers. So Hydrogen Mobility Australia is the industry association representing Australia's emerging hydrogen sector. Claire has a background in policy development and government relations across the private and public sectors. She was at Toyota Australia, where she led the company's government advocacy program that included the introduction of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles into Australia, and she nearly bought one today, didn't you, Claire? Can you give Claire a huge round of applause and welcome her to Warrnambool?
And I do need to apologise. I am actually driving a Toyota Mirai. It's a hydrogen-powered vehicle at present. I'm very fortunate to be part of Toyota Australia's Mirai loan program. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the permission to bring it down here. It does have a range of 550 kilometres, so my plan was to truck it down to Warrnambool, and then we could do some short test drives, and then I could drive it back home. But hopefully next time we'll be able to bring it down to share it with you all. Just so you can see firsthand, this technology is here in Australia now. It's not just overseas in Europe, as we've heard, or in Asian countries where they're manufacturing these vehicles. We actually have them driving on Australian roads right now, albeit there are only 10 Mirais in Australia at present, and 2 of the Hyundai Nexo, which is on the other side next to it. These Hyundai Nexo is available for sale in Australia right now. You will need access to your own refuelling station, however. At the moment we only have 2 stations Australia-wide. But that is one of the key missions of our organisation as the industry association for the hydrogen sector, is to build a nationwide refuelling network across the country so we can enable not only passenger cars but also heavy vehicles into Australia as well, and I'll touch on that shortly. So Hydrogen Mobility Australia is the industry association representing this hydrogen opportunity for Australia now. We've come together, our co-founders being Toyota and Hyundai, with a mission to realise a hydrogen society for Australia. Now, a hydrogen society is really just a model of decarbonisation through the economy-wide application of hydrogen. And the economies that are transitioning to this concept of a hydrogen economy most quickly, or most publicly at present, is Japan and Korea. And this means a lot for Australia. Both countries have made public commitments to a hydrogen future. They recognise they want to decarbonise and also diversify their energy mix. But they need to source their hydrogen from somewhere. Being small nations, heavily populated, if they wish to realise their hydrogen visions, they need a source of hydrogen. And that's where the very, very exciting opportunity is for Australia over the next decades of being a large-scale exporter of hydrogen to Japan, Korea, and hopefully other nations as well. So we've seen Japan has announced that their 2020 Olympics next year will actually be branded the Hydrogen Olympics. So they see this as their opportunity to raise the profile of hydrogen. The Olympic flame will be powered by hydrogen, the buses will run on hydrogen that transport the athletes. It's really their way of getting hydrogen into mainstream thinking. So we are working with the Japanese government at the moment to try and get some Australian-produced hydrogen into Japan for the Olympic Games. But in terms of the bigger opportunity for Australia, this has been looked at very closely by the Australian government. Recognising from 2025 plus the demand for hydrogen from overseas will start to kick in. And so that's why we have projects such as that touched on by Gabrielle, where we're looking at exporting hydrogen produced from brown coal, so liquefying that hydrogen through coal gasification and then capturing the carbon. This is somewhat of a divisive project at times. There is also another opportunity, of course, to make hydrogen from green sources. So we've heard a lot about the electrolysis of hydrogen, so splitting of water. So that opportunity is equally being looked at as a large-scale export opportunity as well. But our industry association is actually mainly focused on the domestic opportunity for hydrogen. We are very excited about the export of hydrogen. It potentially could be bigger than LNG, as some speculators are stating, for our country. But what we recognise is that we actually need to build a domestic sector for hydrogen first. If we're going to build the skills, the capability, the know-how that we need to actually take advantage of that large-scale export in the future, we need to start building domestic projects now. And that's why what we've heard about in Mariestad and also the opportunity for the city of Warrnambool is perfect, that we can start actually training people in hydrogen, in the production, handling and distribution of hydrogen here and now, so we can prepare for those bigger opportunities in the future. But also, so we can enjoy some of the benefits of hydrogen in our own country. We want to decarbonise, we want to secure our energy, and we also want to create new jobs and investment as well. So we've brought together some of Australia's biggest companies. All of these organisations are dedicated to integrating hydrogen in some way, shape or form into their organisations. Some of them producing vehicles, some of them are exploring injecting hydrogen into natural gas networks. All of them recognise that hydrogen will be integral in the future if we are to achieve deep decarbonisation around the world. Obviously, batteries present an ideal way for that shorter term, shorter capacity energy storage. But if we are to ensure that we can capture our renewable energy and store that energy for the longer term in larger quantities, then hydrogen is being recognised as the key way to achieve that. And so we're looking very closely at the opportunity for Australia in a couple of key areas. One of them obviously being transport. That's really our area of strategic focus at the moment as an organisation. But also another important one, as I mentioned, natural gas. We've done a huge amount of work around how do we decarbonise the electricity sector, but in Australia we've only really just started to look at the natural gas sector. So how do we actually do that? One way that's being explored by some of our members, including ATCO, Australian Gas Infrastructure Group and Gemina, is injecting hydrogen into existing natural gas networks now. as not only a means of decarbonising natural gas, but also utilising our natural gas networks as a massive energy store. There is no bigger battery in Australia than our gas pipelines nationwide. So that is a really exciting opportunity for that large-scale production of hydrogen that can really help us to skill up and scale up over time to then be in the best place possible to take advantage for export. Given time constraints, I won't go over my slides in detail, but I just want to touch on why are we interested in hydrogen vehicles. So we know in Australia we already have battery electric vehicles on sale now. The price points are getting increasingly attractive. I don't know if you saw the Hyundai Ioniq, it's probably the cheapest in Australia, about 45k. It's still expensive. It's a good vehicle, still expensive, but that vehicle's about 250, 300 kilometres. So the leading vehicle for hydrogen is about 800 kilometres, which is the Hyundai Nexo. So really what we envisage in the future is we'll have battery electric vehicles for short-term driving, so inner city driving when you're doing short distances each day. For longer driving, such as between Melbourne and Warrnambool, for instance, that's a vehicle like a Hyundai Nexo doing 800 kilometres would be obviously far more suitable. So both these vehicles are complements, and as mentioned a couple of times, they're both electric cars. The only difference with a hydrogen one is you're actually generating electricity on board. I've mentioned a little bit about our transport emissions in Australia. Transport emissions are growing exponentially. They're actually the fastest sector for our emissions intensity since 1990, and not a lot has been done in our country to date. So our governments have been quite relaxed in terms of focusing on this area and actually deciding what they're going to do about it. We're yet to have vehicle emission standards introduced to Australia. So obviously we see that we can do something right now by introducing hydrogen fuel cell vehicles alongside battery electric vehicles into Australia as an opportunity to really decarbonise that sector and introduce zero emissions mobility. Equally, energy security. So we know that Australia is well below our requirements under the IEA. We're supposed to have 90 days of liquid fuel stocks within our country. At the moment, we're averaging about 22 days for petrol. So should there be a supply chain shock, we certainly are not in a very good position in terms of the ability to continue to fuel our vehicles, particularly our defence vehicles, our emergency services vehicles, for no longer than 22 days. So this issue probably isn't focused on enough. And obviously through the generation of hydrogen within our own country, we can start powering our own vehicle fleet. I will just move through this quickly just so we can jump to the Q&A. So one thing I would like to touch on is really focusing on Australia. Since we've given a bit of international context, particularly from a Swedish perspective today, what are we actually doing in Australia? So we're in a very unique position right now. We're very fortunate. Hydrogen has bipartisan support from both sides of federal government. We've seen that there's a huge amount of political will behind hydrogen right now, and both parties have announced commitments to hydrogen. At the moment, the federal government, the coalition, is going through a process through COAG to develop a national hydrogen strategy. That process kicked off in January of this year. That national hydrogen strategy will outline a roadmap for how we develop a domestic and export sector for hydrogen. And obviously we heard the Victorian government is very heavily involved in that process. But also we've seen the ALP, as part of their federal election platform in February, announced $1 billion for a national hydrogen plan. That money will go towards, should they be elected, would go towards a range of hydrogen areas, including refuelling stations. So really the scale of funding that's being backed, put behind hydrogen is really quite impressive and really demonstrates the scale of the opportunity for Australia. And why we're fortunate is that we know no matter what the outcome of the federal election in the next few weeks, we know that a national strategy for hydrogen will be realised because there is bipartisan support. But equally, we're also seeing strong state government support for hydrogen. So not only is the Victorian government developing its own strategy, we also have strategies that are currently in development in Queensland, in WA, and one that has been implemented in South Australia. So we're really seeing a nationwide movement towards how do we capture this hydrogen opportunity and integrate it into our economies. So our organisation, Hydrogen Mobility Australia, is really pleased to be partnering with the federal government to undertake a scoping exercise to actually understand where should we put these hydrogen refuelling stations in the future. As I mentioned, we only have 2 across Australia at the moment. We have another 3 that have recently been announced. But where exactly should we be placing these stations across our immense country? So our government has actually identified as a real need to focus on the heavy transport sector because of the amount of trucking that occurs across Australia in terms of long distance freight and the particular advantages of hydrogen in the heavy vehicle segment. We recognise that that is a really good starting place. So obviously, travelling here today, significant truck movements between Warrnambool and Melbourne, having a hydrogen refuelling station between the 2 locations would actually be an ideal place to enable the movement of zero emissions trucking between the 2 cities. So we'll be looking at exactly the strategic locations across Australia, including Warrnambool, of where should we actually put these stations, who are the customers, and what are the kind of vehicles that we'll be needing to service. So just finally, as an industry association, our main purpose for being is predominantly talking to governments about hydrogen, but we do a lot of awareness raising activity as well. So education programs, talking to the community, and there is no better way of introducing people to hydrogen than vehicles. So we've been doing a lot of test drives with people, members of the community or politicians. One thing I love to do to demonstrate how clean this technology is ask politicians to drive the water that emits from the tailpipe of the car. And I have been fully successful to date. Every politician I've encountered, and I've asked them to take a drink of the water that is emitted from the vehicle. It's a byproduct of the reaction between the hydrogen and oxygen. Obviously, water is the byproduct of that. They've all drunk the water. The water is pure, as far as I'm aware. No one's had any issues to date. So really, hopefully next time I come down, I can bring a vehicle with me. But more broadly than that, I hope that you'll start to see many more hydrogen vehicles on Australian roads soon. And we see that hydrogen really becomes a part of our everyday life. So not only powering our cars, but heating our homes, powering our industry, and also being potentially the next biggest export for Australia too. So thank you.
We'll see if we can do a wisdom of crowds thing here and pass our microphone backwards. You're going to run around. First question? No, I just want to... Okay, our first question over here. We have our panel ready to go.
Hello, my name's Genevieve and I'm the chairperson of Southwest Community Energy. One question is, why does Australia need to export hydrogen when hydrogen can be, I believe, made anywhere?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And it kind of makes sense when I explain why. Because if you look at a country like Japan, very small landmass, huge population, they just don't, it's about size, it's about capacity. So their ability to find the land for large-scale solar farms or wind farms, they just don't have the land mass to do it. Offshore wind could potentially be an option. They're still exploring that now. What they recognise is that Australia, with not only our solar intensity in certain parts of the country, but also our wind ability as well, makes us actually ideal for, because we are talking massive volumes of hydrogen, absolutely huge for it to power a country like Japan. So that's really the main reason. Because of our land mass, we're in a good position to supply into Asia.
I'll just add to that. The other point that we need to analyse is also cost. So when you do small-scale solar or wind-related hydrogen generation, it can be expensive. And so you do the trade-off between what is the benefit to the country, the sustainability program. In Australia, we're making hydrogen from ammonia, from brown coal, separating natural gas, which tends to be in large volumes, much cheaper. You'll see the trade-off. Probably in 10 or 15 years, that question will be a little redundant because you'll be able to make hydrogen much cheaper in many different formats. But at present, there'll be a big export market.
We have another question over here. We've got 1, 2, 3. Well, we got lots. We'll see how many we get through.
I actually think it's great if we can export hydrogen because it's important that we have a strong economy. But what I'm pretty disappointed is we're focusing on our manufacture of hydrogen being through a dirty brown coal industry when we have so many renewable resources. That is the benefit of this country.
and so what's going to be done about that. And I certainly hope that this national strategy is not going to continue to be focusing on using dirty means of producing a clean energy.
Good question, and I'm really glad you feel that way, because that's sort of very much a focus of my department and sort of our strategies. We're very much sort of interested in the development of so-called green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced from renewable sources. So there's huge potential in the state and more broadly in the nation for the production of hydrogen from renewable sources, particularly wind and solar. And whilst there are currently trials for production of hydrogen through brown coal, I would sort of see that as sort of very much a short-term program. It's transitioning us towards a green hydrogen future, and I don't think that it's exclusive, it's one or the other. I think we're very much on track to be producing sort of green hydrogen from renewable sources and promoting the development of that, and that is very much the interests of my department.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Ben. I was just wondering if you could comment on the economics of hydrogen storage when you compare it with, say, battery or pumped hydro, noting the round-trip efficiency of hydrogen conversion. You could also comment on how much maintenance a fuel cell is compared to that sort of tech.
Okay, let's see how I should start there. When you convert solar energy into hydrogen, I will give you some numbers here. If you store 100 kilowatt hours of solar energy into hydrogen, and when you then recover the hydrogen to get the energy back, you will get 60% back. So 100 in and 60 back from the storage. Or did you
put 100 in, you get 100 back?
60%?
That's the dollars. Like in terms of solar cell efficiency, they're only about 80% efficient, so I guess. But
solar panels, PV panels the PV panels are about 20% today that produce electricity, and solar panels that is heating water is about 4 times as efficient for thermal heat, but again, it's electrical energy we need.
Yep, I accept that, but I guess the question is, Warren, if you're going to buy a 10 kilowatt electric battery for your house, how does that expense compare to a 10 kilowatt fuel cell or storage facility for your house?
All right. A battery is obviously cheaper to buy than a fuel cell, but the thing is that if you take the life cycle of a battery, how a battery is produced and used and then recovered again, compared with a fuel cell that is produced once and then will be there for more or less ever. Of course it needs some kind of maintenance, but still it's used for any time. So it's a long-lasting device, and then it's also, it's using hopefully green hydrogen, so the energy system is then there is no emissions at all from the hydrogen energy system.
So there's a payback period, you say?
A payback, okay, if you're looking for short-time payback, you shouldn't buy a fuel cell, but it's a long-term investment to make a change, and then there is a benefit. We know here that you saw one of the pictures that I showed you where we have these 172 flats or apartments. That municipality will recover that installation in 18 years. In 18 years, with the energy price we have today, that's the financial terms in that one.
Hi, how are you guys going? Say that we step into the future and we have done all of this and we have dominated all this technology. we're looking into reusing all our gas infrastructure, but what are we going to do about our poles and wires and all our electrical infrastructure used to transmission of power and power distribution? Pretty much we're rendering this useless unless we find another way to reuse what we already have for power distribution. So what are your thoughts on that problem that we're going to face if we actually do this?
Yeah, one way is, I mean, the existing system should be used, and all expansion where you need, I mean, we are expanding all the time, you have more need for energy consumption, there you could build new microgrids, and the old system will still deliver to people connected to these systems. So it's not that it will be not be useful for the future, it will be there, but eventually the best way for the future is to do microgrids, because you get a much more robust system. You're not depending on the big players, and also these microgrids could use the existing grid to support the grid, to deliver energy into the grid if there are areas that need power or energy. Yeah. So it's still usable.
Hello, and thank you for visiting Warrnambool. My question would require sort of two answers. One is if these container modules, which are obviously metal, would be put into bushfire-prone areas or around them. And the second question is, when you have the cylinders that store the energy inside these containers, wouldn't, because of the heat in certain areas, the water evaporate much faster than, let's say, in Sweden?
Yeah, the hydrogen can stand temperature. If you have the hydrogen in a cylinder of some kind, it can, when the temperature or the cylinder temperature is about 585 degrees, then the hydrogen starts to make problems. Huh? But before that, it's not a problem to keep hydrogen in a cylinder. I mean, the sun will never create that high temperature. It would be fires from the outside, and that is part of the risk assessment where it's placed. If we could have fire here, how can we protect the system? And that is, again, there are different means to do that, but again, the risk assessment is very important, and if that one is done in a proper way, then the risk for a major problem is minimal.
Can I ask a question? Just to get an idea, the home that you converted, what was the volume or weight of hydrogen you set up to store in your home? In other words, how big were the vessels that you had to keep it going through those 4 or 5 months where there's...
Ah, yeah, right. Okay, to produce hydrogen, I'm using water. If you start there. Oh yeah, all right. Okay, right. Fair enough.
Gas. Is there 5 bottles, and how many litres are they?
In our house, we need 6,000 kilowatt hours during the winter season. 6,000 kilowatt hours of energy, and the storage tank to hold that energy in gas is 8 cubic meters of water volume. 8 cubic meters of water volume is the size of the storage tank.
And that will give you that number of hours. That will give you the sufficient hours to take you through those 4 to 5 months.
Yeah, for the winter season, yeah, for the 4 to 5 months. Yes, correct.
And the hydrolyzer that makes the hydrogen, have you got just the one unit, or do you duplicate it so that if one fails, you can switch over?
No, I have only one electrolyzer in the system here, so not two. No, there is no backup regarding that one. The other system, you saw the electrical system that converts solar energy was duplicated. So there I have two systems. If one should fail, the other one takes over. But,
So I have a question over here. Now, we are running out of time, and it's interesting the scope of questions from the social to the political to the bushfire to the technical. You know, there's obviously a lot of conversation that needs to happen, but we're not going to get time for all of them. But we'll have one here, and we'll see how many, and maybe one over here.
Adrian Panelli, Director of Deakin Energy. 1.5 questions. The word courage came up, very related. The word courage came up. I'm wondering what that courageous move is. Is it related to a technical courage or a commercial one, because the finance equation isn't there? And the related question then is the 18 years, what do you require to reduce that down to 10 or 6? And it might be a question even for Gabriel, coming out of the government's work.
No, I mean, okay, you need to do an investment, of course, in the hardware, and the good thing with these hydrogen system is the bigger you make it or build it, the cheaper the cost to produce and store the hydrogen will be, and which means that you can still sell the hydrogen to the same price to the customer, but your cost for storing and producing is getting down all the time. So it's a huge difference to make it bigger. To compare from a small, the difference between a small and a big plant is, I must do that on a piece of paper then to see that it's, when you come up to a certain size, it's really good economics to produce and sell hydrogen. So you can recover. There are, for example, we are involved in where wind turbines will just produce hydrogen instead of electricity to the grid. And an investment, if we take here, in this case, it's a 2 megawatt wind turbine, 2 megawatt size wind turbine, produce about 5 million kilowatt hours a year in Sweden, and that investment for a hydrogen production installation takes 2 years and 4 months to recover, return on investment, in 2 years and 4 months. So selling hydrogen to the industry is much better than selling it as a fuel for mobility. At least in Europe, you're much better paid for hydrogen to industry than mobility. So it's...
Can I answer your 1.5 question? I just wanted to add to that a little bit. I actually went to a lecture last week by Professor Rosgano, and he produced some really interesting statistics on the cost curve of renewable energy technology. And we've all been sort of familiar with the sort of rooftop solar. You know, in terms of 10 years ago, if you were looking to put on some rooftop solar, it was this significant investment, and that's come down a lot faster than actually anyone expected. And that same has gone for large-scale solar, large-scale wind, and a number of other technologies. And he actually spoke about that the same is anticipated to be for hydrogen as well. So I think what we can say that based on current economics, you might be expecting something like around 18 years, and that presumes that you have the electricity prices or energy prices remain the same and the cost of technology remains the same. But I think as the cost of technology goes down and the cost of power may also go up, then obviously those payback periods, going back to your question before as well, I think we would expect to significantly reduce.
So we had one more over here, and then we're going to have to call it quits, I think, because we're going to have to finish the session.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Ian Rees. I'm a retired chemical engineer, and I used to work in the oil and gas and petrochemical industry. It seems to me, now you told a story about hydrogen here, which is great, but the other obvious thing which we have touched on is batteries, storage batteries. And basically you're starting with photovoltaics and wind with wind turbines. You're using the hydrogen to store the energy, and basically you're converting it back into electrical energy, which goes out in an electric motor to drive a car or whatever. So I guess my question or the point is that there's at least two things to think of. This is an alternative. It's either sort of hydrogen or, but it's hydrogen or using storage. The issues, two of the key issues, one is the storage density. And that's when, you're saying about an electric car can do 500 kilometres range versus, I don't know what battery-powered cars can do now. So that's one of the key things that we need to be looking at. And you have a look at the issues about hydrogen storage. Now, that's limited by physics and chemistry. And so I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of change in that. But you do have a look at batteries. That technology is advancing a lot. And so the other question, thing to look at is life cycle analysis. Nothing is free. Whether it's using batteries or whether it's using a hydrogen cell, it's not like hydrogen is free. Everything has costs associated with manufacturing, whether it's batteries or whatever. So, from the point of view of looking at what you're saying versus, say, batteries, we need to have, I believe, we need as a government and society need to look at the comparisons of those and be clear as to what we're selecting there. It's not just hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we sort of take that as a comment, and I very much appreciate that. That's the kind of feedback we're keen to hear as part of our Victorian Hydrogen Investment Program, to understand sort of our role sort of as Victorian Government in the Victoria's hydrogen journey, and the role that we can play and what part hydrogen will play in Victoria's energy future, sort of as a mix of those different types of technologies.
Okay, we are out of time, and we could probably sit in this room and discuss the hydrogen economy for the next 3 or 4 hours. And I think if we're going to get towards a future energy economy, we're going to need lots of conversations. And we're going to need Hydrogen Mobility Australia to be working hard, and we're going to need the state government to be working hard, the federal government, and we're going to need to be working with players around the world who have already walked the talk, like the Mariestad Nielsen Energy team. There's going to be lots of conversations, lots of projects that get us towards this future. Before we close up, Sean, can you just stand up? Can we just give a huge round of applause to Sean Miller from the Sydney Warrnambool. And Ewan as well, stand up. Give us a big round of applause. To our elected officials from Warrnambool as well, to Deakin University for having us. We give a huge round of applause to the Mariestad Nielsen Energy team for coming and sharing their story. I think one thing that we are all completely on the same page with is that we need a new industrial revolution, and it needs to be local, and it needs to be about local work, it needs to be about local energy, it needs to be good for the planet, it needs to be good for society. It's so possible and so doable. We don't need to invent new stuff to bring this revolution to Warrnambool. It's pretty exciting to see what you're already doing in Mariestad in Sweden. We've been pretty inspired by another young Swedish person in Australia in the last few months, where we can look to Sweden for many reasons, and Greta's been amazing, and you guys are amazing as well, and thank you for sharing that journey. I'm from Bendigo, Australia. I promise I won't tell Bendigo until you've already started here. And I think that'll just about do, because I think we've got some media coming to talk to you. The Mariestad Nielsen Energy team are talking, I believe you're meeting council later this afternoon. You're talking with some students in the morning. You're meeting with state government, so there's lots going on, there's lots of conversations still to happen. Put your hands together for this